extreme opposition of view from the two poles of one existence creates no fundamental difficulty for the seeker of the integral yoga. For his whole experience has shown him the necessity of these double terms and their currents of energy, negative and positive, in relation to each other, for the manifestation of what is within the one existence. For himself, personality and impersonality have been the two wings of his spiritual ascension, and he has the prevision that he will reach a height where their helpful interaction will pass into a fusion of their powers and disclose the integral reality and release into action the original force of the divine. Not only in the fundamental aspects, but in all the working of his sadhana, he has felt their double truth and mutually complementary working. An impersonal presence has dominated from above or penetrated and occupied his nature. A light descending has suffused his mind, life power, the very cells of his body, illumined them with knowledge, revealed him to himself down to his most disguised and unsuspected movements, exposing, purifying, destroying, or brilliantly changing all that belonged to the ignorance. A force has poured into him in currents or like a sea, worked in his being and all its members, dissolved, new made, reshaped, transfigured everywhere. A bliss has invaded him and shown that it can make suffering and sorrow impossible and turn pain itself into divine pleasure. A love without limits has joined him to all creatures or revealed to him a world of inseparable intimacy and unspeakable sweetness and beauty, and begun to impose its law of perfection and its ecstasy even amidst the disharmony of terrestrial life. A spiritual truth and right have convicted the good and evil of this world of imperfection or of falsehood and unveiled a supreme good and its clue of subtle harmony and its sublimation of action and feeling and knowledge. But behind all these and in them, he has felt a divinity who is all these things, a bringer of light, a guide, an all knower, a master of force, a giver of bliss, friend, helper, father, mother, playmate in the world game, an absolute master of his being, his soul's beloved and lover. All relations known to human personality are there in the soul's contact with the divine, but they rise towards superhuman levels and compel him towards a divine nature.
Magnificent paragraph and full of suggestions and subtleties. We'll go into each one and it will take the whole period, I'm sure, because it is magnificent. So, before we start this extreme opposition, so what's he talking about the opposition? That is the Purusha and the Prakriti. Okay, one side you see the divine, you see the consciousness, and the other side you see only force. You see nature and spirit. They seem to be opposites. So this is what happens at all the spiritual planes of consciousness. When we are in level, okay, let's go step by step. Level 1, we are in ignorance. I keep repeating so that it gets absolutely embedded in our mind. Okay, so, and my mind also, because then it becomes clear. So level 1, we are in ignorance. We see the multiplicity, we see the many, and we think that it is real. Partly real, but very little, 5%, 10% of 99, 95% of the truth we don't see in the physical world. Okay, what we see is relatively true for our senses and for our practical life, but it's not really true ultimately. Everywhere there's this gradation. Okay, we must keep remember that. So level 1, matter, life and mind. Then our soul is trapped in the matter, life and mind. It's a prisoner and we don't know what our soul is. Level 2, the soul escapes from this prison house of body, mind, life and goes into the spiritual planes of consciousness. I repeat again, spiritual planes of consciousness, Sri Aurobindo calls the ideal planes. In Life Divine, you will find it useful. He calls it the ideal planes. Level 2. Here, as you keep mounting from higher mind to over mind, the view of things goes on changing. Okay? There are 4 levels according to Sri Aurobindo. According to many others, there can be many more, but there is a gradual, like a ramp, it's going up, and your view goes on changing as you go on going higher and higher. Then level 3 is the supermind, where all the problems and all the contradictions and all the dualities disappear. And you understand everything, what is the origin of the universe and who is the master, and everything becomes absolutely clear to one. So we go step by step. I'll do one thing, I'll read out the summary of what he has said in the previous para, beginning with, ending rather with Trinity, eternal. So we'll do that so that we get the continuity. In the previous para, he is saying, this previous para has elaborated on the impersonal aspect of the divine, which is the first experience on the spiritual planes. The spiritual planes is level 2, higher mind to over mind. It is a spiritual experience which is not available to the ordinary man in the field of ignorance and multiplicity. We don't get this experience of the impersonal aspect of the divine. Okay? Impersonal aspect, remember, no person there at all. But you know that you are in different consciousness. There is a huge difference. You are in knowledge. What you did not understand, now you understand everything. Maybe you are also lucky for power as well as ananda. Okay? So all these things are available, but sometimes you may experience only one aspect. Only the consciousness aspect, only the power aspect, only the ananda aspect. I'll tell you, the ananda aspect was experienced by our Sadguru, okay, because his whole shirt was wet with tears. That is because of Ananda. Then take Nietzsche. Nietzsche had the aspect of power, and he exaggerated that to such an extent that it ended with the Nazi philosophy of the superiority of the Aryan race. So it depends on what you are experiencing. Okay. Now he's saying this impersonal experience, it is a spiritual experience which is not available to the ordinary man in the field of ignorance and multiplicity. But the common man, when he conceives of God, it is usually the personal aspect. We think of him as a king or a master or a father. Okay. There is a very interesting letter where Bridudi is saying to Sri Aurobindo that I will call you Baba. Okay. And Sri Aurobindo says, I have no objection to that. So you can, your conception, because we don't understand the impersonal aspect very much, which you understand very well when you go to the spiritual planes of consciousness. So common man, when he conceives of God, is usually the personal aspect, as that of a king governing his vast kingdom, or a father in the family laying down the rules and regulations. The only difference between the two is that man's conception attributes omnipotence, omniscience, and omnipresence to God. When we think of God, yeah, He is all these things. He knows everything, He is capable of everything, and He is also omniscient and omnipresent everywhere. Okay, this is the aspect. We don't really understand it, but this is what we normally say. This is not extended to the human being. Now, Sri Aurobindo says that this human conception of the divine is actually an intuition deeply seated in the heart. It may not be true at the second level, which you experience only the impersonal aspect of the divine, but there is a truth in our very faulty conception of the divine. Okay, there is a truth, and what is that truth? You discover that truth when you go to the third level. That there is a person, there is a personality of the divine. He is impersonal, but he also can be personal. That's what Sri Aurobindo is saying. That this human conception, which is faulty, of the divine, is actually an intuition deeply seated in the heart. That personality of the divine, with all its correlated ideas of consciousness, life, soul, is not something fleeting and transient. There is something that corresponds to that idea. that the divine has a personal form. All forms, limited personalities with specific characteristics, are subject to transience and temporality. In the physical world, that's what it is. But this form of the divine is not transient and not temporal. But God with a finite form is as valid a conception and experience as is God without form and limits. There is certainly something fundamentally true about the personality of God. It is this intuition that is related to universal evolution and the aim of human existence. Okay? We are going towards the ultimate third level of truth where personality and impersonality both are there. Personality justifies the aim of life in the world in spite of its imperfection. Imperfection in spite of its suffering and in spite of its ignorance. There is a God who answers to all your true demands, true rather aspirations, not demands. The journey to a final God reality explains the purpose of life on earth. In the spiritual journey, man encounters a consciousness and a personality which have tremendous value. Remember the experience in jail. He is saying Sri Krishna, guiding him. His first experience was impersonal in Baroda. In jail, in Alipur jail, he is saying Sri Krishna as a personal aspect. Behind all inanimate forms, stones and trees and whatnot, of course the tree is not inanimate, but behind all inanimate things, the presence of a conscious being is felt, seen and realized. Okay? A vibrant consciousness pervades the apparently unconscious physical world. At the very summit, at the third level, is the divinity with a very clear personality, but without limits. Okay? Personality is there, but without limits. All impersonal planes have living beings in them, including representative or leader or king. This is the truth of also everything in the physical world. There is always a representative person. Okay? As we said, the wind is impersonal, but there is a person. The personality of the wind is there. Okay? So exactly in the same way, like a king represents his kingdom. Okay, the kingdom is impersonal and the king is the personality. So everywhere, even animals, they have a leader. Okay, so even in the species in the physical world, every lion has got its alpha male. All the species. So this idea of impersonality and personality is also deeply embedded even in the physical world. Okay, so that's what Sri is saying. Every species has a leader, representative of the collectivity. Normally you call it the alpha male. Okay, so impersonality is a spiritual truth at the level 2, indicating freedom from limitation and finite forms. Okay, this is the reason for the impersonality. This is totally free from all forms. He can take a form, but he is not limited by that form. Like we are limited very much to the form that we have. We think we are in fact the body, mind, life. Then he's saying impersonality is a spiritual truth, indicating freedom from limitation and finite form. That's why you experience the impersonality of the divine. There you realize that the divine is not bound by his forms. Personality is the obverse, complementary aspect of the same. He uses the word obverse and reverse, like a coin. Okay? The coin has two sides. One side is the obverse and the other side is the reverse. Okay? Complementary aspects of the same truth, indicating consciousness, proximity, intimacy, love. Both, finally, we have to say, both impersonality and personality are truths of the spirit, which you experience very, very clearly, mostly at the third level. You can get glimpses of this in the second level also of the spiritual consciousness of the overmind. You can get glimpses of it. But the full realization comes at the third level. This is what he has said in the previous para. Now, we go back to the paragraph that we read today. Okay. This extreme opposition of views. What is the extreme opposition? Personality and impersonality. God with form and God without form. Okay. Extreme opposition of view from the two poles of one existence creates no fundamental difficulty for the seeker of the integral yoga. Okay? he is going to use the word he, himself and all that. That very clearly refers to himself. Okay? But here, the integral yoga is not bothered by this dichotomy because they say that, okay, it's one aspect. But the others who experience that, they come to very drastic conclusions. The Buddhists and the Mayavadins, okay, many others also, the Jains, they feel that the divine is impersonal. And even the Arya Samajists, to have a personality is very limited. Okay? That's not to be done. You have to think of God only as an impersonal, formless. That's what he's saying. But for the integral yogi, no problem at all. It is only one aspect. We take it like that. For his whole experience has shown him. A very interesting phrase, because his and his shown him, he is talking of himself. That's what happened to him. No? First he saw the impersonal aspect, then he saw the personal aspect also in jail, even before the jail, but anyway. For his whole experience has shown him the necessity of these double terms and their currents of energy, negative and positive, in relation to each other. We'll discuss this briefly, okay? So, first of all, necessity of these two terms. Why should there be these two terms? Okay? Because both are aspects. And you must not think that the divine is only impersonal. Just like so many philosophies do think like that. So the integral yogi understands that it is only one aspect. So for him, there is no problem at all. God can be absolutely static, but he can also be constantly in movement. Okay? And this also is related. Impersonality is static. Personality is with limited forms and movement. It is associated with movement and constant transience. Okay, so this is what he is saying. Now, interesting, he is saying negative and positive in relation to each other. So when you are in the material consciousness, the impersonal aspect of the divine is negative to you. The materialist thinks there is nothing like God. And when you are in the second level, you are in the spiritual level of consciousness, matter seems to become absolutely an unreal thing. So it is negative to him. But when you rise higher and higher, the integral yogi realizes that these are only aspects. Both are true at different levels. Okay? So there is no absolute negativity like the materialistic thinking. There is no absolute negativity like the ascetic is thinking. They are relative to each other, depending at which level you are. If you are a material man, God is the personal aspect or the impulse, whatever it is absolutely negative. There is no such thing as God. And when you are in the spiritual planes of consciousness, Mayavadin, Buddhists, okay, Jains, the world becomes unreal and it is to be rejected. Okay. This is the, but both are true for the integral yogi. Negative and positive in relation to each other. For the manifestation of what is within one existence. Remember the one of the principles, the one becomes the many. And when the one becomes the many are infinite. So if you go negatively and positively, you come to the two aspects. Absolute impersonality, absolute personality. Okay? So that's what he's saying. When you go on reducing a form to a smaller condition, the form disappears entirely and becomes impersonal. It's like I use a very crude image. Okay, take a bottle of gas and compress it. It is there inside that. It's a form, but you open it, the soul comes out of the body, mind, life, and becomes absolutely outside the body, mind, life. It doesn't have a form anymore. You have opened the bottle. What has happened? That gas is there everywhere, but it has gone everywhere. No more limitation of the bottle. So it becomes impersonal. Both are same depending at how you see. Both are there. That's what it is. So for himself, just one second. For himself, personality and impersonality have been the two wings of his spiritual ascension. And he has the prevision that he will reach. He is talking of the integral yoga, huh? So he is giving his own experience. All the others will not agree with this. Okay. For his whole experience is shown. For himself, personality and impersonality have been the two wings of his spiritual ascension. First he had the impersonality in Baroda, then personality later on when he came to Bengal and he was jailed. Okay. Have been the two wings of his spiritual ascension, and he has a prevision that he will reach a height where their helpful interaction will pass into a fusion of their powers and disclose the integral reality and release into action the original force of the divine. So this whole phrase, level 3, okay? He has the prevision, he knows, even when he is in the spiritual place of consciousness, he knows that he has to reach a height where the both aspects, personal and impersonal, will fuse, will pass into a fusion of their powers and disclose the integral reality and release into action. Now, release into action, not only third level, but the third level is being released into action in the level 1. Okay? So with that consciousness, you can act in the physical world with the full power of the third level, the original force of the divine. Not only in the fundamental aspects, but in all the working of his sadhana, he has felt this double truth and mutually complementary working. Okay? Consciousness and chit, impersonality and personality, they are constantly helping each other. He has felt their double truth. But and what are the fundamental aspects? A gap he has put, okay? Chit, Shakti, Anand. Sat, Chit, Shakti, Ananda. These are the fundamental aspects. So, Sat is substance, okay, which you experience in these spiritual planes of consciousness. Level 2, you experience the Sat. Okay? But fundamental aspects, Chit and Shakti and Ananda, all these are fundamental aspects. But in all the working of his sadhana, he has felt their double truth and mutually complementary working. An impersonal, now very interesting note, because those who have grown up in India, take Buddha's case or take others, they have remained stuck at the cultural background of India. Get rid of the world. Okay. So they have been conditioned by that. But what about Sri Aurobindo? He grew up in the West, the materialistic background. So that has also made him go to the ultimate. Okay, so it's interesting. Depending on where you are also, you are very much, the outer being is conditioned by your environment. And this is so true. In whichever condition you are subject to those conditions. If you are, this is very interesting if you think about it carefully. A, a, a what is it called? An Eskimo who is living in the Arctic regions has no bread and no rice. He has to survive on fish and meat. This environment is conditioning him. If you are in the tropical regions, it's either wheat or rice. Okay, or if you are in the Tahitian islands, the Pacific Islands, South Sea Islands, then you are you have the coconuts and all these things. So very much the environment is conditioning your outer being. Okay, so this is also so. Sri Aurobindo grew up in the West is one of the reasons why he was grown up in the West. Don't be subject to the Indian idea that the world is unreal. So it's very interesting. So he was necessarily taken there. So now I go back to the text. An impersonal presence has dominated from above and penetrated and occupied his nature. This was in Baroda. Okay. The very cells of his body occupied his nature, descending, a light descending has suffused his mind, life power, the very cells of his body, illumined them with knowledge, revealed him to himself. Now just think of that, it's very interesting. Revealed him to himself, down to his most disguised and unsuspected movements, exposing, purifying, destroying, and brilliantly changing all that belong to the ignorance. Now, this really requires a little bit of thinking. Okay? So, an impersonal presence has dominated from above and penetrated and occupied his nature. I refer you back to the sonnet where he says, I don't think it's a sonnet. The golden light came down into my head, and then he says it came down into my heart, then it went down into his life, and finally reached even his feet. Completely, okay? He's using two words here, occupy, penetrate, occupy, and suffuse. Suffuse also is to enter into something and completely occupy it. Just like very interesting words also. We have to pay attention to the words also. Suffuse. Suppose you put a glass of absolutely pure water, you put one drop of red. Okay. Slowly the red percolates and fills everything. So suffuse exactly in that way. No? Penetrate, occupy, and suffuse his mind, life power, the very cells of his body, illumined them with knowledge, revealed him to himself. Now, what does this mean? Revealed him to himself. The him is the higher level, the reality of himself at third level, and to himself down in the physical world. Okay, so he has two aspects. All of us have two aspects. We have a divine soul in us, and we have a body mind life. So this also, this, if you see, he is explaining to you much more than what he is saying. Huh? There is him and there is himself. There is a him which is the truth, and to himself down in his most disguised. So the higher being, his own higher being, has told him what is there in the lower being. Okay, so this reveals him to himself, down to his most disguised and unsuspected movements, exposing. It shows you all the defects that you have, purifying, destroying, and brilliantly changing all that belong to the ignorance. The ignorance is the level 1. Okay, so the light comes down and changes all these things. He himself, it is not that God is something else and you are something else. You are God. So your God aspect is telling your body mind life aspect, go and do this and see what are the defects. This is a very interesting phrase. The more you think about it, it's so interesting. Him to himself. Okay. So reveal him to himself down to his most desire. Okay, I go to the next sentence. A force has poured into him in currents or like a sea. Now this is also interesting. Okay, he has said it can come like a current. Okay, or it can come like a sea. A vast oneness descends into him. Okay, this is very interesting because Ramakrishna also has described when power enters into you, our consciousness enters into you, what are the movements that you feel? Okay, Ramakrishna is a very interesting. He has explained this way. It can be very very mild, like an ant walking on your skin. Okay, it can be, you can feel that power, and you feel it like an ant walking on the skin. Okay, or it can be like a snake slithering. Okay, it can be all these different types of things here explained. So it can come in so many ways. So here Surendra is using only two. Currents or like a sea. Okay? That like a sea reminds you, in one sonnet he says, I have drunk Ananda like a giant's wine. A giant drinking wine is not a human being drinking wine. Okay? So there is a sea. Absolutely inundate you. Okay? Or it can be a current, slow, small something. Worked in his being and all its members, dissolved, new made, reshaped, transfigured everywhere. Okay? So this is what happens when you are doing sadhana, you are remodeled entirely. It's like remodeling an old house. Okay? I have a friend from Singapore here, and his father or grandfather even had a house here. He was a devotee of Mother and Swayambhu. Some of you know him, maybe know him, but his name is Surendra. Okay, and his name is Surendra Ranganathan. Actually, his namesake, and he has settled. He was in Singapore. Now he has settled here, and they had an ancient house. Okay, in I think it's called Real Belcom or something. I'm not sure. So anyway, Elizabeth Beck's house opposite that. Okay, he has a house. It is an ancient house. He remodeled it completely. So this is what happens also in your sadhana. All the defects and all the crumbling walls and all these things are completely replaced. So this is a dangerous period sometimes, and it can take the form of illnesses because the physical defects have to be corrected. So it is quite common for yogis to enter into a period where there is some sort of illness. Okay, but you must not think of it as pure illness. You must think of it as a change occurring in you, a remodeling that is happening in you. Okay. I'm going a little beyond the text, but it's very interesting because he's using these words, no? Dissolve, new made, reshape, transfigured everywhere. The old is there, it is transfigured, it's not rejected. It is completely remodeled. That's what happens to everybody. It happened to Jiddu Krishnamurti, who called it the process. He was undergoing the process. It happened to Sadhguru. He almost died. Okay. And he became a wreck, absolutely. But he was remodeled and he is now fine. Okay. So, to a certain extent, it happened to Sriranga also and mother also. Once she was very not at all well. What then they called Tarun Banerjee. You know Tarun Banerjee? He used to play the tabla in the school. Some of you would know him.
Yes, I know. He was Kripal teacher.
His grandfather was a doctor and he was called, Sriranga called him. And he came and saw mother and he told Sriranga what was wrong with her. All the other doctors could not say. Okay, this is an article in Mother India, it's published long ago. Very interesting. And Sriranga, once he knew the symptoms, he cured mother. Okay. So, in fact, again, once more he was called. So, this doctor, Dr. Babu, he was very much respected in the ashram. I've seen him, but I did not know him personally. He used to have a long flowing beard. Okay, so a very interesting man. He was highly respected because twice he was called in. Mother called him once for Sriranga and Sriranga called him once for mother. Okay. He was in the north, but he came and finally he settled here. Tarun Banerjee is his grandfather. Dr. Babu, they used to call him. So, this sort of thing, dissolving, new made, reshaped, transfigured everywhere. So, you have to give full value to these words. There is a complete, physically you are changed, okay, vitally you are changed, and you are mentally also there is change. Okay? So,
I have a question.
Tell me.
Is this illness limited to this divine or the higher up only, or sometimes it happens with us also that some inner changes will bring us some type of illness, but we don't know. We think it is outer, but it is something inner which is changing. At our level also it happens?
It can happen because the cause of everything is in this higher plane of consciousness. The cause of everything. So it is very, very true in that sense, but it's not a yogic principle maybe, but the cause of Vivekananda has a very interesting law. He says that everything that happens at the physical level, the cause of it is in the vital level. And everything that is happening at the vital level, the cause is in the mental level. And whatever is happening in the mental, the cause is in the level 2. And whatever is happening in level 2, the cause ultimately is level 3. So the divine is the cause for everything. But we don't see that change. But this is essentially what you are saying is true. So whatever happens to you, the real cause is in the higher plane of consciousness. Okay? So I'll tell you an interesting incident which I have mentioned earlier also, which will illustrate the point that we are discussing. Temi Ben, okay, all of you who are there, definitely Pallavi and I think Yasmin also would know Temi Ben because she was a Parsi.
Yes.
Yeah. So Temi Ben had a very bad skin. Okay. I mean, really, it was bad. She was a very sensitive person and she used to teach us poetry. A wonderful person and a beautiful, wonderful poet. Sriranga is appreciated. When I was in the press, okay, I published her poems. It doesn't sell at all well, but I thought that it should be recorded for posterity. So I took the trouble and did it. Nobody was in favor of that because the book would not sell, but we did it anyway. It is available. Okay, so she was a very sensitive person. I used to see her every Saturday. We used to meet every Saturday in Golconda. So this person had a very bad skin. Okay, sometimes it used to even, eczema. Sometimes is fluid comes out. It's a very horrible situation. So she showed that to mother, and mother said that what is happening at the physical level on your body, the cause is in the vital. Okay, when you are purifying your vital, all the things that are there in the vital, they come down into the body. So this is the principle that Pallavi was just, no, not Pallavi,
Shilpa.
Shilpa was talking about. Okay, so
Shilpa.
whatever happens at one level, the cause is elsewhere. So when you reject something from your mind, it goes down into the vital. When you reject it from the vital, it goes down into the body. That's what happened to the women. Mother explained that to her. And so not to worry about it. It is a purification process. Okay. So then when you reject it from the body also, if you have the power and you are a yogi, it goes down into the inconscient. Okay. It never disappears. That which has been once never disappears. It is always there at some level or other. Everything that happens in the physical world is preserved. That is why the inconscient, everything that's happening goes down into the inconscient and is embedded there. Okay? So, there is, the Gita says, yeah, tell me.
Then there is no way of changing the inconscient. I mean, if everything goes into the inconscient, then we have to.
Okay, it's a very interesting question that you have raised. Okay, but the inconscient also is infinite. So
Yes.
you can change the higher levels, but it goes down to the deeper levels. The inconscient is an eternal principle. Okay, at the lowest level there is darkness, just like the sea. Okay, so if the sea at the lowest level is absolutely dark, but the darkness starts, suppose the sea is 10 miles deep. Okay, if you shine a light, it can go up to 10 meters. So that part is, the inconscient is changed. Then when you shine even higher light, it can go down to 2 miles, 3 miles. But the darkness at the lowest level is an eternal principle. The divine wouldn't have created it just out of a fancy. So that is always remaining. But you can always increase the range of your consciousness above and below. You can go on. Okay, it goes on expanding. But the inconscient itself, universal inconscient, I don't think ever disappears, because it's a storehouse of everything that has happened. And the storehouse of everything that is to happen is at the higher level. Okay. The superconscient is a storehouse of everything that is going to manifest and happen. And the inconscient at the bottom is a storehouse of everything that has happened. It is also the storehouse of also that which is to happen, because it is also the source of life and mind. Okay. So,
But
this
that storehouse affects our life, right?
very much. So wherever you are, it is always affecting. That's exactly why Shivanda wants to go to the third level. Even if you are in level 2, your ignorance is affecting you. You are seeing only part reality in level 2. So at present, level 3 would be the solution to the problems of level 2. But that doesn't mean to say that that is the last. There will be more and more. Okay. So the Gita is very clear. It says that which has been or that which exists can never go out of existence. Very clear. Okay. And that which is in existence can never come into existence. This is the Gita's very clear. So now you can understand how it is stored somewhere.
Yes, but Ranga, we are talking about transformation. So there is no transformation of the inconscient.
Individual transformation of the inconscient in yourself, as I told you just now, 1 mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, 4 miles, 10 miles, 20 miles possible. But the lowest will always remain like that.
Okay.
But this should not discourage you, because when you transform even 1 centimeter, it is so magnificent, okay, that it is more than satisfying. So this truth one must realize, because the spirit and matter seem to be opposites. This is intentionally done. The divine is saying, I am light, but I am not limited by my light. I can also be darkness. And don't limit me. I can be absolute darkness also. That's the thing. Okay, so you have to see it in the right way. All right. So
May I say something about Temi Ben?
yes, please do that.
You know, she was so surrendered to the mother that
Yeah.
whenever people from Bombay came and gave her money or things,
Yeah.
she would take it immediately and give it to the mother.
Yes.
And they said, "Oh, where's the sense in giving her anything? Because she gives everything away to mother." And Temi Ben would say, "Yeah, but then when I need anything, mother is there to give it to me. So why should I keep anything?"
Exactly.
And it was so beautiful, her surrender to the Divine Mother. She
Absolutely.
never wore any clothes. We never offered her any sari or anything because
Yes.
she would only wear what was given to her by prosperity.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
You
She
know,
was
she was so devoted. She was a wonderful, wonderful person.
absolutely. I have no
And
doubt.
she was so quiet and silent,
Yeah.
but inside you could appreciate like what a great soul she was.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. No
You
doubt.
know, she was a very good soul,
Oh.
and she never craves for any food or any such thing. And
Yeah.
people would even I would go and give her so many things, and she says, "Oh, but there is no need,"
Yeah.
and her appetite, she would only eat one spoon of rice and her tummy was full
Yes.
because her stomach had totally contracted.
Yeah.
She just couldn't eat.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was a privilege to have known a soul like her.
Absolutely. And
And her brother
uh,
was Dr. Masalawala. He was an orthopedic surgeon and
yes.
he was our teacher
Yeah.
in Grant Medical College. But
Yes.
he was poles apart from his sister.
Yes. That's right. Yeah. Masala Wala also used to come here. I remember. Okay. She was wonderful. And she had described to me her experiences. Okay. Once she felt that there was a fire coming out of her head. Okay. She would feel that. And Mota Kaka, who was to be in the Charupoto, who used to be in the head of the reception service, saw that in her. Okay. He actually saw that. And he told her, "Wow, you are looking like a yogini," he told her. She explained to me this experience that she had. She was very psychic, extremely psychic. Wonderful
It was
person.
it was super, learning from her for future poetry. It was, she used to go to the depth of the each and every poet. It's so good.
Absolutely. Very sensitive person. But see how when there is a purification taking place, okay, even the yogis can go through a period of great suffering. Okay, so
Hmm.
in fact, this is a truth so deeply embedded, okay, that in Christianity you feel that you cannot go to the divine without suffering.
Hmm.
This they go to that extent. Okay, unless you have suffering, you cannot go to the divine. Now, this is, I don't know if you know, but Saint Bernadette, okay, you have heard about her? She
Hmm.
was 1870, 1860, something like that, okay? And she had a vision of the Mother Mary, the Divine Mother Mary, and she had no sorrow at all and no only happiness. And the other Christian sisters would not believe her. They would say that, how can it be possible when you have no suffering? But she had absolutely no suffering at all. There was only Ananda in her. She died very young, and it's a beautiful story. There is also a film on her, Saint Bernadette. Okay, so this is the, so you may undergo, but Sri Aurobindo says the sunlit path. If you bring the psychic forward, there is no suffering. The suffering will be there in the body mind life, which you will, others commonly will interpret as suffering. But you don't interpret it as suffering, you interpret it as a remodeling. You interpret it as a change, uh, a rebuilding of your being. You see it in that way. you are happy with whatever happens. So one Sridhar, that's why he used to insist on the sunlit path, he used to call it. He says, suffering is not necessary at all. It will come naturally when you are remodeling a house. You have to break down old walls and build new walls. That's always a painful process for a human being. But it can be taken in the right spirit. It's not a suffering anymore for you. Okay, so we have gone beyond.
You know,
Yeah, tell me.
Semipen used to have, Narad used to come to her room,
Yeah.
and we used to read Savitri, and I think Pallavi's mother-in-law also used to come.
Uh-huh.
Yes,
And
yes.
we would just read Savitri. She wouldn't say anything much, and she would say, "Oh, how beautiful! How beautiful!" And after the class, they used to bring little snacks to eat so that we could feed Temiben. We would eat very little, and of course, we used to eat more.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Pallavi, if your mother-in-law, you must be knowing. She used to come.
Yeah, I know. Even in Santor, they had the classes also.
Yes. In the evenings, Kusumben used to
Yes,
call her.
yes.
I mean,
yes.
once or twice I had attended because I was not living in Pondy.
Hmm.
But I did attend, and it was something very beautiful.
Okay, so we have reached 8:40. I think we stop here today. Okay. So you see how very interesting paragraph. Okay, so each phrase and each word is so you can expand on that and see. So in those texts always every minor word also reveals a whole process of yoga. Okay, it's wonderful. A bliss has invaded him and shown that it can make suffering and sorrow impossible and turn pain itself into divine pleasure. And love without limits has joined him to all creatures and revealed to him a world of inseparable intimacy and unspeakable sweetness and beauty, and begun to impose its law of perfection and its ecstasy even amidst the disharmony of terrestrial life. A spiritual truth and right have convicted the good and evil of this world. Now we'll have to discuss this next time. We'll do that. Okay, Sunki, note. We'll do this sentence because it's very interesting. What does he mean by convict? A spiritual truth and right have convicted the good and evil of this world. So we have to discuss what is meant by convicted. Okay, so the good and evil of this world are false. It's a criminal to see it as opposites. That's what he means. When a judge convicts a prisoner, he's saying that you are wrong and you will be punished. So the good and evil that you see in the physical world is being convicted by the higher consciousness. There is no good and no evil. That's what is meant. Okay, or of falsehood, and unveil the supreme good and its clue of subtle harmony and its sublimation of action and feeling and knowledge. But behind all these and in them, he has felt a divinity. Even in all these things which are seem to be absolutely the opposite of the divine, there is a divinity hiding behind all these things. Who is all these things? And what's he? A bringer of light, a guide, all knower, a master of force, giver of bliss, friend, helper, father, mother, playmate in the world game. An absolute master of his being, his soul's beloved and lover. All relations known to human personality are there in the soul's contact with the divine. So this is also very interesting phrase. Every human relationship with another human can be applied to the divine. And through that also you can go to the highest, including even hatred and enmity. That's the interesting part. Okay? But they rise towards superhuman levels and compel him towards a divine nature. So next time we'll go to it's an integral knowledge. Sunki, note down in the chat.
Yes.
Okay. So, au revoir everybody. Have
Thank you. Thank you, Rangata.
Thank you, Rangata.
Have a nice day.
Bless you, Toki.